Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Boris TV tutorial. And in this lesson, we're going to do things a little bit differently than what we normally do. Normally we handle one tutorial per episode of Boris TV, but in this special edition of Boris TV, we're actually going to do a walkthrough of the demo that I did for Boris Continuum Complete 9 from the NAB 2014 show floor. So we're actually going to go through all of the new effects. We're going to take a look at what you can do with them and how they're really going to help not only speed up your workflow, but fix common problems that you're going to run into when working on your day-to-day edits. Okay, short introduction here. Let's just get into Avid's Media Composer and let's get started. Now, before we get started, I always want to remind everyone, and this is something that I do when I start out every live demo that I do. One thing that's important to keep in mind about Boris Continuum Complete, not necessarily version 9, but Boris Continuum Complete in general. You know, a lot of people look at, the company Boris Effects and they say, oh, okay, well, they pretty much just do effects like glows and things like that. What's important to keep in mind about BCC is that it's an essential suite of not only effects, but of tools that you're going to use to obviously fix common problems that you might run into in, like I said in the intro, your day-to-day edits. Now, the first effect that we're going to start out with is not something that's new to Boris Continuum Complete, but it's something that has been improved on. And of course, I'm talking about the chroma key effect. Now, this is an award-winning chroma key. So how do you take an award-winning chroma key and make it better? Well, the issues that we ran into in the past was that with chroma key, if we wanted to do things like matte choking and light wrapping and things like that, we ended up having to do stackable effects. But not inside Boris Continuum Complete 9. We now, using the new Chroma Key Studio, not only have the fantastic award-winning chroma key, but we now have these additional tools, remember, tools, built into the effect, like I said, like matte choker and like light wrap, that you're going to be able to use and not have to worry about stacking things. You'll be able to do them all in one effect in real time in your timeline. Okay, so let's take a look at the example that we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so here's my Chroma Key Studio. You can see that I have this shot of a man sitting in a box, and what we want to do is we want to composite him into this shot right here. This is sort of a master control for a TV studio. And you can see that we got a few issues going on. Now, how we would normally deal with this shot in the past is the first thing we do is we'd go into effects mode, Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 for all my Windows friends out there. We would navigate to the key and blend section, and we would find the chroma key effect. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm just going to go right to Chroma Key Studio, and I'm going to show you sort of your common workflow. I'm going to take Chroma Key Studio, just simply drag it and drop it down onto the shot. Now, you can see that we have this cyclorama wall right here. That's a little bit curved. So you think to yourself, okay, well, we're going to need to get rid of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to step into effects mode. We're just going to come right down to geometrics, which is located at the bottom of most effects inside of Boris Continuum Complete. And we're just going to crop this out just so we can get rid of most of the blue. But you can see the problem that we're going to run into immediately. Because the cyc wall is actually curved, we don't have the flexibility of just getting in and doing a basic crop around our talent. We're going to need to improvise a little bit. What I'm going to do is just undo what I just did, because what we actually want to do is we want to get in first of all before we do anything else, and we're going to want to roto our guy. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to expand my window here just so we get a little bit of a bigger view. Let's just expand this out here. There we go. Very nice. We'll just shrink down our project window here. Very cool. And let's do that. Let's actually get in and let's roto him. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, well, Kev, hang on a second. How would I do that inside of Media Composer without having to use an effect like Animat? Well, that's the beauty of Chroma Key Studio. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to navigate right back up to the top of the effect, because like I said, what we want to do is we want to do an actual mask. Now, you'll see right up here at the top of the effect, we can actually get in and do an outside mask. Now, right now, the outside mask is turned to off. What I'm going to do is switch that to rectangle. You'll see as soon as I change that to rectangle, we now can get in and adjust the actual rectangle crop that we have going on. But you know what? Rectangle doesn't help us, as we just saw. What other options do we have in here? Well, I have an egg-shaped one. Of course, we can get in, do exactly the same thing, get in and sort of adjust this however we want. But again, not going to solve our problem. But you'll take a look that if we come to the last parameter in here, spline mask, well, this might be getting sort of in the direction of what we're going to want to do. We actually do want to create a spline to get in and roto our guy out here. But you're going to notice as soon as I start clicking, nothing happens. Well, something must not be working right. Well, remember, it's like I always say, it's not that it's not working right, it's that I'm not working it right. what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to the effects editor, and believe it or not, I'm actually going to bypass the effect altogether. Now you're probably thinking, well, why would you do that? Well, the reason I'm going to bypass the effect is because one of the limitations of Media Composer is that as soon as I start adding points to a spline, it immediately closes that spline. It's not like After Effects where it's open until you get to the last point, and once you click on that last point, then it closes. So I'm just going to bypass the effect, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate right up here to my options, and you're going to see the second option I have here is to customize the spline UI. Well, as soon as I select that, now I can actually get in, and I can actually create even curved Bezier splines right inside of the effect itself. Very cool. Now I'm not going to be too precise here, obviously for the purposes of what we're doing, but you'll see that as soon as I close that last one, nothing happens. Well, that's because I have the effect bypassed right now. So let's just come back up. Let's unbypass the effect and take a look at what we have now. I'm just going to step out of effects mode for a second. Obviously, you can see I could have got in here. I could have ignored that, but that's okay for the purposes of what we're doing, because now what we have is we basically now have our guy rotoed out, so we only see the blue screen behind him. And now we can get in and just focus on our chroma key. So let's do that. Again, I'm going to step back into effects mode, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to head right down here to our chroma key section, which is located right here. I'm just going to twirl up geometrics here. Let's twirl down chroma key, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick sort of an area maybe right about in here to pick as the chroma key color. All I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the color, I'm going to click and hold, drag right over here, pick the area that I want, and let go. And you'll see now what I'm going to do is just zoom back a little bit just so we get a little bit of a better idea of what's going on here. And what I should have done here was I should have done that actually. We'll step back into effects mode here so that you can see perfect. And what I can do to get rid of the spline here is I can actually just switch from my spline UI here right back to the standard position, and you'll see there it goes. Now you'll see that we got a little bit of a mess happening here, but that's okay because I'm actually only looking at this at half res. Now you'll see that I can actually get in and adjust this ever so slightly just to get rid of a little bit of junk that we saw on either side of the screen, and that should probably solve our problem. There we go, perfect. Okay, but you'll see we got some other things happening. You'll see that if I zoom in here on my shot, you can actually see where I did the crop, but don't worry about that. We're going to get rid of that in just a second. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to see exactly what is going on with my chroma key. Let's just zoom back here a little bit. What we're going to do is inside of the effect itself, all we're going to do is switch views. Right now I'm taking a look at the final composite view. What I'm going to do is just come to my view options. I'm going to drop that down, and I'm going to come right down here and say show me the chroma key mask or the chroma key matte, and you can see there it is right there. Now most people think, oh, you're going to need to get in and soften up your splines and stuff. I'm not going to do any of that. We're going to get to that in just a second. I need to adjust my key a little bit here, so all I'm going to do is actually just adjust the lightness parameter just a little bit, because all I want is really the shadow sort of down here towards the bottom. Now once I get in and actually start choking the mask or the matte, we're going to get rid of a lot of this here, so that's okay. So let's actually do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here. I'm just going to switch back to my final composite here. There we go. And I'm going to zoom in a lot. There we go, very nice. Okay, and you can see that when I did the chroma key, I got a little bit of a haze going on around the talent. Now believe it or not, we're actually going to make things worse before they get better. You've always heard that expression, things will get worse before they get better. We're actually going to intentionally do that to fix this problem. What we're going to do is we're just going to come all the way down here, and let's come down to our matte choker. I'm simply going to turn this on. Now remember, in the past, this used to be an additional effect that we had to add on top of chroma key. Again, light wrap located right here, an additional effect we had to add on top. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but why should we have to do that when we can have it all sort of inside of one uniform studio effect? So let's talk about the matte choker first. I'm simply going to turn matte choker on. You'll see as soon as I do, it gives us sort of a very blurred choke. The problem is that I really don't want it to be like that. I think that's a bit too much of a choke. So let's twirl down our matte choker parameters. Let's set the blur to be something like, I don't know, 1.25. Okay? You'll see that's looking a lot better. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take the choke, drag it way out, and I'm going to take the gray soften and just drag it way out. And you can see, like I said before, we actually made it worse before it got better, but that's okay. Now I did this for a reason, so we can see it at its absolute worst. Now you'll see also up here, you can see it right around the hair. We're going to want to have a little bit of softness around the hair, but all I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to back off on the gray soften, and as I do, you're going to see that edge disappear, and I'm even okay with it sort of right down around 50. Now I'm going to add a light wrap to this, and you'll see around the hair's looking great. What's important to keep in mind is this was originally up at 3, and you can see the difference. Got a lot more detail around the edges, having it at about 1.25. That's looking actually very good. And you'll see we still have a lot of detail around the edge of the box. Very nice. Okay. So again, like I said, we're going to add some light wrap. I'm just going to zoom back a little bit here. We'll just sort of center him up because I want you to see exactly what happens when I add the light wrap. Let's come down to light wrap. Let's simply turn light wrap on and take a look at that. We now have a realistic looking light wrap. And I know you're thinking, well, Kev, how do I know that that's realistic? I mean, you're saying it is. You know, we kind of saw something appear. But again, what we can do is head right back to the top here to our view options, drop that down. Let's take a look at the wrap on black only and take a look at that. You'll see where there's no monitors, we actually lose that. And what we can also do now is we can get really specific about what we want the light wrap to do. Again, we can come right down here. You'll see the background I'm telling it is the first below, which in this case there isn't anything there. So it's defaulting to the set44 loop.mov file. And of course we get in, add more lightness. We could undo that here. I'm just going to add more softness, or we could even adjust the width. And you'll see very simple to see when everything's on black, and then all we have to do when we're done is simply come right back up here. We're going to switch back to the final composite. Let's actually just step out of effects mode so everything just goes back to the way it was. And we now have a very cool, very good looking chroma key. Except for one problem. Well, this studio is looking really blue. Except our talent, if he was actually sitting in this studio, doesn't look very blue, does he? Well, you know, we can only take chroma keys so far before we actually have to sort of, you know, take things further on our own. So what we're going to want to do is we are actually going to want to double up on some effects here to actually create a super realistic looking composite. So let's do that right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the effects palette here, Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows. And what we're going to do is we're going to head right back up here to color and tone. And I'm going to use the color balance effect right here. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to take it, I'm going to use Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows to drag and drop this effect down. Now, as soon as I do, what's important to keep in mind, you're probably thinking, okay, awesome. What we're going to do is we're going to come in here. I'll just zoom back here. And what we're going to do in here is we're just going to come down. Let's just start adjusting. Let's add some blue in here. Oh. You know what, the only problem is it's still adding that blue to everything, including the background, and that's not what we want to do. We only want to add the blue to our talent in a box, we'll call him. So what am I doing wrong? Well, what I'm doing wrong now is because I've stacked these effects, I need to tell BCC that I've done that so that it knows only to affect the chroma keyed element here. So how do I do that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to Chroma Key Studio. I'm going to come right down here to the Title Matte section, and I'm going to tell Chroma Key Studio that this is the start of a multi-filter. I'm simply going to click on multi-filter. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see the background get a bit weird, which is okay. It blurs out a bit, but just ignore that for right now. What we're going to do is we're going to head right back up to color balance, again, right back to Title Matte, and I'm going to tell color balance that this is going to be the, for right now, the end of the multi-filter. As soon as I do, everything snaps back to the way it was before. Now you're probably thinking, well, it looks like nothing's really happened, but take a look at what happens now if I adjust just the blue. It just affects our talent. And of course, if you take a look down here, the shadow as well. But what we're going to do is we're just going to back off on the red a little bit, back off on the green, maybe to about there. We'll give it a bit of blue. Then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of combine this with the original, just kind of like that. So now what we have is actually talent that looks like he's sitting in that studio. Now one last thing that I would do if I zoom in here, let's actually just step back into effects mode. Okay, because what I've actually done here, believe it or not, and this was sort of something I did before we even got into the lesson here, I'm just going to step down, is we actually zoomed in. This was actually a QuickTime movie. And we actually zoomed in on it. The only problem was by doing that, what ends up happening is that if there's a little bit of noise in the shot, it's of course going to get magnified. You'll see that if I zoom in here, just move right down here, you can see that we do have a bit of noise that's happening if I drag through. There you go. You can actually see it right in here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of film grain to my talent here. So let's just zoom back. Let's switch back so that we can see our talent. And of course, again, exactly what we've done before. Let's come right back up to the effects palette, Command and 8. Let's come up here to, let's come to film style. Now, of course, I could use the standard film grain, but in some cases, if you want a little bit more flexibility, depending on what's going on, I actually like to use film damage. I'm just going to take film damage. I'm going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows. Again, drag and drop right down here. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that, again, this is being applied to everything. Don't want to do that. Now, the only thing that I actually have to change in here is that inside of my color balance, this is now a multi-filter mid. And of course, we're going to film damage to make that the multi-filter end. What I'm going to do is just turn off color. We'll leave grain. I'll turn dirt off, turn hair off, turn scratches off. You'll see the flexibility with this effect. And you'll see that inside of the grain section, we have the grain here just set to 15. And I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. You can see we've added a little bit of grain. So if I bypass the effect, you can see we've just added that little bit of noise to give this composite an ultra realistic look. He actually looks like he's sitting in that studio now. So you can see with the new and improved Chroma Key Studio, obviously like I say it's new and improved, the Chroma Key Studio itself is a new effect, but the chroma keyer in it's still that award-winning BCC chroma keyer. It's been taken to the next level and lets you do so much within the effect itself without having to stack things. This way what you can do is save your stacking to make your shots look more realistic than they did originally. Okay, so let's move on now. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two new effects, but I'm going to throw a new tool into the mix as well that I think that you're really going to be excited about. Okay, so first thing though, let's actually close our bin here. I'm just going to close the effects palette for right now. Now the two new effects that I'm talking about are two-strip color and a fantastic new vignette effect. I can't tell you how many times I've had to go into Marquee to create a vignette look or create it, in a program like Photoshop. Well, you know what? Now I have the ability to quickly and easily create cool vignettes right inside of my Media Composer timeline, again, in real time. Now let's start out by talking about the two-strip color effect first. Now, of course, this mimics the two-strip Technicolor film process from the classic days of cinema. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply the effect to these three shots. Now, in the past, how you would normally apply the effect is you'd either take the effect and drag and drop it down into each shot, or what you would do is you would probably collapse these shots in together just like that, and then what you would do is take the effect and drag it and drop it onto there. But I'm actually not going to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is call up the effects palette here, Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows, and let's head up to where two-strip color is located. Of course, it is a film look, so we're going to find it inside of film style. There it is right there, two-strip color. And all I'm going to do is I'm simply going to step into effects mode, Shift and Y. I'm going to select these three shots by holding Shift on the keyboard as I select them. Now all I'm going to do is hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and simply double click on the effect that I want to apply, and you'll see now that that effect has been applied to all three of those shots. Now I think I'm going to zoom back first of all here. There we go, very cool. And now in most cases how you would normally start out with an effect like this, because there's so many different possibilities, and for me, in a lot of cases I don't have time to sit and play with an effect when I first start using it. I like to get in and just use the preset. So how would we do that in the past? Well, what we would do is we would come up to our presets and we'd say, oh wow, lots of presets. So let's come down to blown out green. Okay, that might not be what I want. Okay, so let's go to the next one, blown out heat. Nope. Okay, maybe what I'll do is I'll just say, show me the next preset, and the next one, and the next one. And as I'm clicking through, a producer might say, well, hang on a second, I like that, preset 4 presets ago. And you're like, oh, was it this one? And it can really be a time-consuming process just to find one preset that you want to work with, especially in a great effect like two-strip color, where you have so many presets at your disposal. Well, that's where the new FX browser comes in. Now, we actually have two flavors of the FX browser. We have the integrated FX browser that I'm going to show you right now, and we have the standalone browser that I'll show you in just a second. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click on my layer here just to collapse everything back to the way it was. And what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back up to the effects editor, and I'm simply going to tell it to show me the effects browser. Now, I do have a dedicated tutorial specifically looking at the effects browser inside of Avid's Media Composer and inside of Adobe's After Effects. In this case, I'm going to give you a very brief overview, but I encourage you to head on over to the Boris Effects website or head on over to YouTube. Simply type in BCC9 Effects Browser and you'll find the tutorial that I'm referring to. But as you can see right here, what we basically have is we have the effects browser that breaks things down into 3 categories. We have our presets, we have our preview window, and most importantly, in a lot of cases, depending on your producer, we have the history down here at the bottom. Now, for me, I don't want to be clicking through each one. I kind of want to get a preview of exactly what's going on just by looking at the thumbnail. No problem. All I need to do is simply increase the size of the thumbnail here. And there we go. Take a look at that. Now what I can do is simply just drag down to take a look at all of the different presets right here in the preset window. And of course, what's important to keep in mind is that I do have static presets and I do have animated presets as well. What we can actually do is we can take a look at this by text view here. And now in this case, these are all static. You can see that they're all called static XML preset, but if these were, if we had some that were animated, we would actually see that they were animated here, and we could apply them from within the effects browser just the way that we would apply any static preset as well. We also have the ability to get in and search for presets if we want to. But what I'm going to do for right now is I'm just going to switch back to the standard preset view just like this. And let's pick a cool one here that we might want to use. Let's pick, I don't know. Why don't we choose purple, red, purple, high saturation right here. Now, you know what? I don't really know if this is one that I would want to use. So what I want to do is I want to get a preview of what this is going to look like. So all I need to do over here in the preview window is simply hit the space bar. Now you're going to see right now that this is actually previewing at 23 frames per second. Now this is obviously going to vary based on the type of clip you're working with. But you'll see that what's going to happen is once it gets to the end, it's actually going to, depending on the preview rate that it was previewing at, it's actually going to play this back in real time, because what it did the first pass through is it buffered those clips into your RAM. We also have the ability, now in this case I have 3 shots put together, but you know what? I really only want to see this up against that elephant shot. You'll see that if I drag through, there's the elephant shot there. So how do I do that? Well, it's very simple. I can actually just drag the preview range right here just down to preview, and I'll just, ballpark guess this here, right about there, to just get a look at what the elephants look like. Very cool. Now you know that you're always going to have a producer that says, well, you know what did this look like before? No problem. I do have the ability to get in and take a look at compare mode from right here within the effects browser. Very, very cool. Now, of course, you'll see that I come down here. I do have a couple other options. Right now, I'm looking at everything at half res. So I could switch that up to full res, looking very nice and very sharp. And I also have the ability, depending on how I'm looking at this, I could be looking at titles. I could be looking at mattes. So do I want to composite that over black, over a checkerboard, or over the background? Now, in this case, the background fills the entire frame. So this is actually irrelevant to what I'm doing. But just the fact that you have the ability to get in and preview this over titles is fantastic as well. Now the best part is that once you're ready to go and you're like, you know what, this is the preset that I want to use, I'm just going to turn compare mode off, all you need to do now is simply come down and say apply, and that preset's going to be applied to your shots in this case, not just your single shot. But if you had the effect applied to just one shot, it would apply to that instantaneously. Now again, like I said, I have done an extensive tutorial specifically on the effects browser that you can find by heading on over to the Boris Effects website at borisfx.com. Now, of course, I am talking again about the integrated FX browser. But what about the standalone version of the FX browser as well? What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to step into this effect here just so that I can bypass that main 2-strip color effect that I did. We're just going to close the effects editor here for just 1 second. I'm going to come right back up here to the effects palette. I'm going to come over here to the browser, and let's talk about the standalone FX browser. Now, why would you want the standalone FX browser? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit Shift and Y to step into effects mode. You'll see that I can come in here. I can apply this again to a title matte. You'll see that the title right now is set, or the alpha is set to straight. I can invert the title matte if I want to, and even choose what the background I want to be is. But in this case, I don't have any of that because it's just being applied to a clip. I'm just going to launch the effects browser. Now you're going to see that what we now have is we now have things that look similar, but it's broken up in a little bit of a different way. Now, why is that? Well, what's important to keep in mind is that in the standalone version of the browser, we can't apply the effect. This is just to really get an idea of presets that producers might want to use. So for example, if I wanted to get in and decide on a film style that I wanted to work with, what I could do is simply just choose the film style category here, and then you can see that I can come through and choose any one of these presets here to get a preview of what this would look like on my shot. Very cool. Once we've narrowed it down to what we want, then we can actually head on out of the standalone version of the browser, head over to the category we want, and apply the specific preset. Now there is one other thing that I do want to show you. I'm just going to remove the standalone browser here. I'm just going to step back for a second here, and let's just monkey around with this shot here. Let's just, I don't know, give it some more saturation, give it some more brightness. We're just going to make it look completely different than probably what it should look like. Sure, let's call it, let's just have it look like that. Because you know what, I love this. This is my purple look. So what we're going to do is we're going to head on up to the preset drop down, and we're going to save this. I'm going to call this Kevin's Purple Preset. I'm simply going to say save. What I'm going to do now is head on back to the FX browser, because of course what's happened now that I've created that preset, you'll see that I actually have it located right there. So you'll see as you get in and start creating your own presets, they're going to appear inside the FX browser just as any other preset that came bundled with BCC 9. Okay, so let's actually just come back. Let's just pick sort of a calm, let's just pick this gold sort of look here, because what I want to do now is I want to show you the other great new effect included inside the film category, and of course I am talking about the vignette effect. So what we're going to do, because I'm applying vignette to the entire shot, all I need to do is simply come back to film style. I'm going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and just simply drag and drop vignette down onto the shot, and take a look at that. A very cool vignette, and we'll just zoom back here, there we go. A very cool, nice looking vignette that you can simply get in and adjust the radius however you like We could adjust the color of the vignette too if we wanted to, but what I really like is the fact that we don't need to just have it darken around the edges. I could actually have it blur around the edges if I wanted to. Or, you know what? Maybe I want to darken it and blur it. I can actually do both just like that. And of course, again, this is an effect that will play back in real time, so you can simply take it, drag it and drop it onto your shot, make whatever alterations you want, hit play on the keyboard, and show the client the results immediately. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk a little bit about another essential tool, actually two essential tools that you're really going to love inside of BCC 9. Now, both these new tools fall into the image restoration category, and the first one has to do with what is the rage. Now, if you were at NAB 2014 this year, I'm sorry, you can tell me that you saw, this booth full and that booth full, but trust me, the one booth that was an absolute insane madhouse was GoPro. GoPro cameras have become all the rage. Really, action cameras in general, with GoPro leading the charge, have become essentially the big tool that everybody wants to have, whether it's all the way from making skateboard videos all the way up to reality television. The only problem is in the past, Media Composer editors really didn't have a way that we could get in and adjust this footage inside of our timeline. We ended up having to use the GoPro Studio application to do it. Not anymore though. Now, new inside of BCC 9, we have the new lens correction effect that's designed specifically to correct the GoPro fisheye lens look, that sort of comes inherent with a lot of the GoPro footage that's shot these days. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two examples. I'm going to show you a common example here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to call up the most common example. Now, if you happen to watch the BCC 9 teaser video, you would have seen this shot in here. Now, this shot is courtesy of Jeff Foster. He is the pixel painter at thepixelpainter.com. You'll see that we actually have a couple things going on with this shot. You'll see this is a quadcopter shot with a GoPro. Couple things going on here. Like I said, we can actually see the quadcopter. That's actually very easy to get rid of. What I'm going to do is simply right click. We're going to come down to our source settings. We're going to come over to frame flex here. Let's just reposition this here just a little bit just so that I can see that quadcopter. There we go. And let's just shrink this down just a little bit. We'll just slide it over a little bit. We'll just simply apply that, say OK. And we're going to get rid of that quadcopter in our shot. So let's just say OK. And you can see now that inside of our shot, that quadcopter is gone. Now let's actually take that. We'll just apply it back into our timeline here just to get rid of it. There we go. Now, I may have gotten rid of that quadcopter, but I have not gotten rid of the fisheye look. Take a look at how bent these train tracks look. They are looking pretty bent. So now in the past, like I said, we'd have to go into GoPro Studio to fix this. We'd have to then export the file and then bring it into Media Composer, but we don't need to do that anymore. Now, in the most common of situations, all we would basically need to do is come to image restoration, come to lens correction, simply take the effect, drag it and drop it, and take a look. We now have fixed that pesky fisheye look. You can see our tracks are looking perfectly straight, and this shot is pretty much ready to go in whatever production we might need it for. But what about a little bit of a more uncommon situation you might run into? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to just head back to my image restoration here. What about this shot right here? Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Kev, this shot actually doesn't look that bad. I could probably use this, in my production. But we actually have a couple things going on here. And if you take a look up here in the upper right-hand corner, we can actually see the edge of the window of the bus that we're shooting this from. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to push the next shot down here because that's going to be the example for our next effect here. And let's just push this down. We're going to use that for Magic Sharp here. So we'll just push all that down just so we've got our nice shot of, I'm going to assume this is downtown London. So let's take a look. Now, believe it or not, to fix this shot, I'm actually going to use my safe titles. So let's call up safe title here. I can just do that right here. And the white color not really helping me too much. So let's actually come over to our settings. Let's come down to our grid setting. Not the general one. We want the grid one here. There we go. And let's come over to our display. Let's just set the white color to be something like, I don't know, green, just so that it stands out. That's looking pretty good. And believe it or not, I could actually get in and show some tick marks, some thirds, and some points just like that. But I think I'm going to be okay just showing things the way that they were. What I'm going to do is simply say okay, and let's take a look at the windows over here. So let's just advance our shot down just a little bit here to about there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to step into effects mode here just so that I can quickly and easily, because I don't have it as a shortcut here, zoom in on my shot. Now you'll see that if I come over here, take a look at how bent this window looks if I come back here, and we can use our grid as a great reference. You can see, take a look. If I line it up right down here on the window and then I move up here, take a look at how bent that window is. The only problem is, and I'm just going to zoom back a little bit here and let's just turn off our safes here, is that if I come back to lens correction right here, let's go to lens correction, let's just drag and drop it. As soon as I drag and drop it, you'll see the problem is because it's compensating for the most common GoPro setup, it actually then takes our footage and warps it even worse than it was before. So what do we do in this situation besides just say to the producer, oh, I'm sure it's probably fine, let's just go with it the way that it is. The whole point is that you want to look like a superstar when you're sitting in that edit chair. And this is how you do it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to step back into effects mode and I'm just going to set the correction to be 0. No correction at all. The shot is exactly the way that it was. If I hit bypass here, you'll see the only thing that actually happens is the sky changes color a bit, because if I come down into my general controls, I have the safe levels turned on. So obviously the sky is a little bit overblown outside of what is considered safe for the white levels. So Boris Continuum Complete's lens correction effect is actually bringing it back into safe. There we go. Very handy to have. Now, if you don't want it, you can obviously turn safe levels off and you'll be all set to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm just going to do a slight correction, nothing too big. Let's come down and let's set the correction to be somewhere around 11. Now, as soon as I do that, you're going to see, I'm just going to undo what I just did. You're going to see that we've actually fixed the window problem. And we've kind of fixed a little bit of a bent window problem. Take a look. Let's just put this back at about 11. The only problem is that if I turn my grid back on here, you'll see, and let's just bring back a little bit here. Let's just zoom in again. We've kind of fixed it. Let's actually just undo what I just did here, because I was just holding the wrong buttons when I did that. Let's just set our correction to be about 12. There we go. Let's zoom in. I'm just going to hold Command and Option on the Mac, Control and Alt on Windows to bring up the hand tool. Just drag over here. Just move back a little bit here, because you'll see that we kind of have fixed it a little bit, but it hasn't fixed it that much. And again, what most people would say in this case is, oh, Kev, you know what? It's fine the way it is. Let's just go with it. We're not going to do that, because really, what I'm showing you is taking me about, 5 to 10 minutes to show you. But when you see how it's done, you'll be able to correct these problems in about 1 minute flat, because we have another fantastic parameter inside this effect that's going to fix the problem that we have with the perspective still being off. And right here, if I come all the way down to the bottom, I'm talking about the vertical and the horizontal perspective. Basically what it's going to do is just slightly change the perspective vertically or horizontally, and we're just going to do it very slight. Let's just set it to be a value of about 2, and I want you to watch what happens as soon as I do that to the windows over here. Take a look at that. It's now straightened those windows out perfectly. So let's zoom back now. What I'm going to do is just turn the grid off here, because what I want to do is show you the before and after. Now right now we're currently looking at the after. What I want to do is show you the before and the after and the before. Take a look. Now you really didn't notice that much of a difference when you first looked at it, but look at the difference now. It's made a huge difference to fix this shot, and like I said, this should really be something that you're fixing in a matter of seconds, not really in the amount of time it took me to show it to you. But you see that the flexibility you have now, again, this is real time inside a Media Composer, so you could basically import your GoPro footage, drop it into your timeline, take this effect, drag and drop, and if it's the standard GoPro, you're off to the races. But if it's a very slight modification you need to make, get in, take your 30 seconds or a minute to make your modifications. Again, simply step out of effects mode, hit play on the keyboard, and your client will be amazed every time. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about another common situation that I know that you all run into. Let's move down to my next shot here. Now, most people, again, would take a look at a shot like this and think to themselves, oh, you know what, this is not too bad. We actually have a few issues going on here. But what I want to do is I want to step into effects mode again, just so I can zoom in here, because I don't have it mapped as a shortcut. We'll just zoom in here. And you can see that as I zoom in, this shot really isn't as sharp as I would like it to be. I'd actually like it to stand out a little bit more. And to be perfectly honest, these trees down at the bottom are looking a little bit dead. So I'd like to get in and brighten these trees up. But you'll see that if I step out of effects mode here and I come back and I hit play, we actually have another issue going on here with the shot just shaking a bit. So there's actually 3 things we're going to need to do to this shot. And it actually got worse right as I stopped it. Take a look at that. What I need to do is I need to get in, I need to fix that camera shake. I need to get in and sharpen this shot up a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost the colors a little bit. So let me show you how simple this process should be when you're working inside of Avid's Media Composer. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of stabilization to this shot. What I'm going to do is inside of, again, image restoration, you see we're sticking inside this one category. All I'm going to do is take optical stabilizer, drag and drop it down onto the shot. You'll see I'm now being prompted by the shot to simply click the Analyze button to continue. Let's step into effects mode. We'll just zoom back here. There we go. And what I'm going to do, again, like the effect tells me to do, is I'm simply going to click Analyze. Now, obviously, you'll see this is going super fast. Now, obviously, analyzing time will vary based on the processing power of your system, and again, also on the size of your footage. This is an HD shot. But you'll see that what happens is as soon as it's done this really weird zoom in to my shot. Shot doesn't look like it used to. I'm just going to step down a layer here just so you can see what it looked like before and what it looks like now. Take a look. I'm just going to hit play here. That's kind of not what this shot looked like. So what's actually going on? Well, I'm going to step back into effects mode here. The effect has actually done what it's been asked to do. It's stabilized this shot, but I don't want to stabilize this shot. I actually just want to smooth it out a little bit. So all I'm going to do is switch to smooth, and you'll see now that if I hit play, the shot is now nice and smooth. Okay, so now let's step in and let's sharpen this shot up. I'm just going to come to about the midway point here. And all we're going to do now, again, because we're applying this to the entire shot, I don't need to get in and make this a multi-filter effect. All I'm going to do is simply head on up to Magic Sharp, Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, drag and drop right down here, and take a look at what's going to happen to my footage as soon as I do this. Drag and drop. You can see that the footage is actually sharpened up. I'm just going to step into effects mode here. Let's just zoom in a little bit. There we go. And let's just bypass Magic Sharp so you can see what's going on. You can see that it's actually sharpened the shot up, but something else has actually happened here at the same time. Take a look at all the noise that's been introduced into the sky. Well, that's not really what we want. So let's fix that first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come right down here to the noise suppression. Let's set noise suppression to be somewhere around 8. Now the only problem with doing that is we've suppressed the noise in the sky, but we've kind of set this shot right back to where it was originally. You'll see if I bypass, it kind of looks the same. So what do I do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come right down to the sharpen threshold, and I'm just going to start dragging it up, and you'll see that as I do, it's actually sharpening the shot. Let's take a look at some before and after. Again, let's bypass. Take a look at all the detail that's returned to the building by simply adjusting the sharpen threshold. I haven't adjusted the amount at all, but we haven't reintroduced that noise to the sky. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the sharpen amount a little bit just to get a little bit more detail in the paint. I'm assuming that's paint and not bird poop on the elephant statue, probably to about right there. And I know you're probably thinking, well, Kev, you've kind of done all this. We're seeing a little bit of pixelation happening around the edges here, but what's important to keep in mind is I'm also zoomed in about 200% here. If I zoom all the way back, I want to show you the before and after. Take a look at the before and take a look at the after. Look at all the detail we've now gotten back just by simply doing these minor modifications, especially down here in the trees and even in the elephant's trunk. This was the before and this was the after. A huge difference, especially, the most common example I always use is when you're taking DVC Pro HD footage and you're dropping it into a, if you're using 720p and dropping it into a 1080p timeline, you're blowing that footage up. This is where Magic Sharp is really going to step in and help you out by just sharpening that footage ever so slightly. Okay, so now, like I said, I wanted to add a little bit more color back into these trees and even into the rooftops down here. We've got a little bit too much smog happening, I think. So let's come back to another great effect, again located inside of Film Style. I'm just going to use Fast Film Process. Again, Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, drag and drop. Let's go back and let's use our new friend, the FX Browser. We're going to go to the FX Browser, and I'm going to use the Saturation Boost Deep Blacks. Now you'll see that as soon as I do that, it's going to add a lot of color back in, but we really can't see the difference until we apply it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the before, just like that, and the after. Now you're probably wondering, why is there that little bit of a zoom in or a step in? Remember, we did that optical stabilization. So of course, once we do that, we need to just zoom in to lose the little bit of a rotation and stuff that's going to happen around the edges. But take a look at that, even just the fast film process. Look at that before and look at that after. It just makes everything just look so much more alive, and the before and after is just really staggering. And you'll see this is, again, something that really should be done in a matter of minutes. Once you get rolling, you should be able to take a look at a shot and immediately say, you know what? I can actually sharpen that up a little bit, give it a little bit of color back, boom, 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 done, hit play on your keyboard, and you're all set to show this to the client sitting next to you. Okay, so let's move on, and we're going to talk about another classic effect inside of Boris Continuum Complete, and it's one that I know that everyone uses all the time. And I'm talking about pan and zoom. Now, pan and zoom has been, again, not a new effect, but it's one that's been improved. How has it been improved? Well, we now have the capability to get in and add 3D rotations to our still images right inside the effect to create some very cool pan and zoom Ken Burns style effects. And what I'm also going to do is show you why pan and zoom is going to be really your only tool for doing the Ken Burns effect, because you should be able to create complex animations, not in minutes, but literally in seconds, using this very cool effect. Okay, so let's just close everything up and let's get into pan and zoom and let's take a look.